What was the scariest we need to leave, now gut feeling that you've ever experienced? Serious. Surfing a fairly secluded reef break, offshore across a channel. This place is in a very southern state of Australia. Overcast weather, but a still, amazing day for the waves. I was surfing with only one other guy. We were trading waves and getting to know each other in between sets. I asked what he did for a living and he was a marine biologist. We'd both recently moved to the area and were new to surfing it as well. Despite it being extremely good surf, after 40 minutes he says, "I don't like this. Something feels off. I feel like I'm being watched, like I'm bait." I didn't want to leave as it was excellent surf, but this guy was a marine biologist, so I took his instinct as a sign to play it safe. We paddled back across the deep channel together as quickly as we could without panicking and walked the 15-minute trek back to the car park talking sheet the whole way. I got his mobile number for future surfs together given how small town it is here and not knowing anyone. We noticed a 15-foot inflatable boat pull up near the reef and hang around for a bit without much thought. Later that night while looking at my social media, I read about 3 fishermen at the same location we were at that morning, at the same time in their boat, as they pulled up to check their cray pots on the beach side of the reef. They were circled twice by a great white shark that was as big as their boat. That guy most likely saved me from a horrible experience that day. I messaged him with the link to the Facebook page with the comments regarding their experience. Chills ran through my body for a good 20 minutes. He was adamant he felt the presence of something and he was right. When I was about 8, in 1985, an old El Camino pulled up alongside my friend and I, with a man saying he knew my mom. He did know her name, but something felt off, so I grabbed my friend and ran. When we told my mom, she went white and called the cops. Turns out, this guy thought my mom had stolen his job at the steel mill she worked at the time and wanted to hurt her. He already had a warrant out for nearly killing his wife that morning. When I was 16, my mom had a terrible feeling about an outing some friends and I were going on. Hindsight being 20/20, it was a stupid move for me to go anyway, but I did. Long story short, there was a car accident, my 2 best friends died, and I nearly did. It'll be 30 years in November. I still regret getting in that car every day. My friends might still be alive if I hadn't. My mom had that mama spidey sense, she still does. More recently, I was at our other house in the country with my oldest son and his wife and kids. There was a break in the storms, and my son decided to go home instead of spending the night. I was filled with dread at the thought of them going home so late, since we were dealing with intermittent but severe storms. So much dread that I started crying and begging them not to leave. Thankfully, they agreed. We all started home the next morning with them following me and my husband. We came up on this stretch of road that we know has no lights at night, to see police barricading a washed out bridge, and cranes retrieving cars. We all piled out of our cars to ask the officers what happened. Apparently, there were several cars that had kept going, not knowing the bridge was out. The lone survivor in the first car had told the police that they went off the bridge at about 9:30 p.m. That's about the time my son wanted to leave. My husband just looked at me, and my boy hugged me extra tight, because he knew what could have happened. Viewing to see a flat that didn't exist, not my story, but one my mum told me from her 20s when she was living and working in London, UK. I'll do my best to retell it. Also, I'm dyslexic, so apologies in advance for grammar. This story always gives me the creeps though when I think about it. So back in her 20s, my mum was living in London and looking to move into a slightly bigger place. She'd found a really good price for a flat slightly out from the area she was hoping. She'd called the agent to book a viewing, and that's when things turned odd. So the guy booking the viewing starting asking weird requests and questions, such as to bring her passport, her age, race, and physical appearance. Question mark. Would she be coming on her own? Did she have a car or would she be getting the bus? He very persistent that she should arrive by bus as it would be easiest for her, explains it was a straight road down from the bus stop to the apartment block. Obviously quite unnerved by this call but still interested because the flat looked ideal. She and my dad, who were dating at the time, decided to check the exterior and surrounding area. The day before the viewing they drove there. First passing the bus stop, he was indicating her to arrive via. From the bus stop there was about 150-200 meters of derelict wasteland that she would have to walk past to get to the flat, and standing at the end of the street in the location this apartment block should have been was a huge abandoned building. Smashed broken windows, graffiti, no entry signs. The lot. Definitely nothing inhabitable in sight. Still, when she tells this today, you can see how much it, rightly, shook her. Of course she didn't go to her viewing. However, she informed the police, advising them of the planned time and place. From what she saw, from following up with them, they didn't appear to take this tip seriously and little was done. A couple years later though, while in a pub with some friends, she gets chatting to a guy she just met through mutual friends that night. He was in the police and through conversation her story came up. He said that that area at the time of her viewing had a huge human trafficking problem. Still gives me chills. After graduating undergrad, I was working as a caseworker for individuals with developmental disabilities and got assigned a new case for a young man who had autism and severe behavioral concerns. I met him at his grandmother's house since she had custody of him since his parents weren't around. I think mom was in prison. Met this young man who was probably about 6'0" and weighing around 250 pounds but had the developmental capacity of a 5-year-old child with a hairpin trigger temper. The house he was living in was absolutely destroyed, with the other piece of furniture that was not mashed up was an oversized beanbag chair in the living room. Grandma gave up trying to send the kid to school since he would absolutely destroy the place if he was forced to go. Grandma was no peach, but I felt for her and wanted to help. One of the meetings I was having with them, the kid and grandma seemed especially tense, like pacing around the room and smacking the walls. After about an hour of trying to get stuff done and realizing that it was not going to happen on this trip, it happens in this line of work, I decided to call it since the kid was becoming more and more agitated. Grandma was annoyed I would have to come back again, but we scheduled for a week or so out and left my business card with a reminder of the appointment. I leave to go back to my home state for a few days, and when I get back I get called into my supervisor's office. I guess the night I left the kid had a complete breakdown and beat his grandmother to death. No one noticed until the kid came wandering outside after a day or two covered in blood. I probably missed everything by less than 3 hours. Years ago, when I was still living at home with the parents, I drove home around 2 AM. As I parked my car, I noticed a man walking down the street. I decided to wait until he passed my car and was far enough for me to get out. However, instead he passed my car and hid behind the van that was directly parked behind me. I guess he did not think I was paying attention to him. So I called my dad, who was asleep, to come down and get me. He didn't. When the guy saw my dad, he immediately ran away. I was lucky. Reminds of a night I was closing up at work in high school. I worked at a pool hall till midnight, 1 AM-ish on weekends. One winter night I locked up and went to my car, which was parked next to the front door. Started it, then got out and scraped ice off the windows. As I was getting close to done, a guy walked around the side of the building, on the same side of the car as I was, passenger side. It was late and dark and I don't normally see anyone, so I decided I was done scraping and walked around to the driver's side and got in and locked the door. I locked the door just as this guy passed the driver's side rear bumper. He then slowed a little, and a second guy came around the corner from the same direction. He waited for guy number 2, and then they walked off together. Spooked me right out. Years ago, before cell phones, I was driving home from dropping my husband at the train at 4:30 AM. Only me and one other car on the road. He started turning where I turned twice, so I didn't go home. I went to an all-night gas station and called the police. I gave them a description of his car. 3 weeks later, he was arrested. Turns out he was following women home and driving past their house and doubling back to grape them. No one had noticed his car. I'm glad I paid attention. Me and my little sister went camping in the woods very close to our house when we were kids. We'd seen this bald guy with a blue shirt and a dog walking around, which isn't unusual for the area. You'll often see people walking and say hello. For some reason though, I just got this tight feeling in my chest, and my sister must have too, because we both just gave each other this look. I don't know what it was that made me do it. This is very out of character for me, but I took a photo of the back of him as he was walking away. A while later, we see the same guy again near the lake. He comes over and asks about the tent we're carrying, where we'll be setting up, and are we camping with our dad? We say yes, we're just going to see him now. A lie. We must have had the same moment of psychicness, because we walked off up a fork in the path until we were out of view, then looked at each other and jumped down a path hidden by the bushes and waited behind them on the parallel trail for a bit. The guy watched us walk off, pretended to play with his dog until he couldn't see us, then turned around and ran up the path after us. Thankfully he didn't see us hidden and carried on up straight where he thought we'd gone. We decided camping was a bad idea and went home. That evening my mum shows us a post in the local residents group, which is a picture of the same bald guy trying to break into someone's house. Apparently he'd just been walking round trying people's front doors and claimed to be a repair guy when he was stopped. I dread to ducking think what his intentions were, but it was very lucky me and my sister knew those woods so well, otherwise we wouldn't have thought to go down one of the hidden paths. I was around 10 or 11 years old and had been invited to a sleepover. My mom didn't really like me going to those, because I'd usually end up staying up way too late and then being cranky the whole next day. When she dropped me off, she told me her usual send-off of just remember, if you want to leave, I will come get you. It doesn't matter what time it is, just call me. The sleepover party itself was the usual routine. We watched a movie, gossiped, prank called some boys, this being before cell phones and caller ID, broke out the Ouija board, etc. It turned out that the girl hosting the sleepover had an older brother, high school aged, who also had some friends over. I remember they stood in the doorway of the rec room where we were and something about them made my blood run cold, and I just remember thinking I'm going to go home. I went upstairs and asked to use the phone, saying I wasn't feeling well and needed to go home. Her mom at first told me no, and then berated me for being a baby, but I just kept saying that I needed to call my mom, and I still remember the feeling I had that I needed to leave. Finally I was allowed to use the phone. My mom came to get me, and we swung by Dairy Queen on the way home. My mom was always cool like that, and I still remember the huge feeling of relief I had when she pulled up and I hopped into her car. Years later I found out that the brother and or his friends had abused some of the girls at the sleepover while they slept. No one reported it at the time, and I think it actually took years for any of the girls to compare notes and find out that they weren't the only one this had happened to. I feel bad that that happened to them, but still glad that I listened to my gut and got the hell out of there. Back in 2019 me, my husband and two girls aged 6 and 9 were on a road trip in the south. We had booked an apartment in Atlanta through Airbnb without knowing the neighborhood at all. It was bad, really sketchy with a lot of creepy looking people hanging around. We went into the apartment, and immediately my 6-year-old said I don't like it here. The door didn't lock properly. The beds were dirty, there was rotting food in the fridge, and the bathroom had not been cleaned in ages. My husband called the owner, who was furious and refused to give us a refund. To de-escalate the situation, my husband offered to not leave a negative review if we could just get our money back. The owner agreed, but asked us to wait for him so that they could talk about it in person. As soon as he hung up, I told my husband that we needed to leave, now. We hurried to the car, and as we pulled out of the parking garage, we saw the owner driving up with 4 friends. He didn't see us and we bolted out of there. Ended up at a hotel on the 14th floor, didn't even feel safe at street level. I was 12 at the time, and my favorite thing in the world was spending the night at my grandma's house. We lived in the sticks at the time, and my grandma lived closer to the nearest town. Thursday night was grandma's night. I felt something off one Thursday night and asked my mom if I could just stay home with my mom and dad. They reluctantly agreed. I went home, watched some TV, and went to bed. My bedroom was on the adjoining wall to the living room. I wasn't really asleep, but I heard my mom keep saying my dad's name over and over again, with a hint of panic. I sneak out to the living room, and my dad is on the couch with his head tilted back, snoring, really loud. Which wasn't uncommon, but my mom was beside him, shaking him and telling him to wake up. She yelled at me to go back to bed. I didn't, obviously. I snuck to their bedroom to call 911. I told the dispatcher that my dad was asleep and my mom was trying to wake him up, but she couldn't. Eventually the phone call went to the living room and my mom talked to the dispatcher. They sent an ambulance to the middle of nowhere. My dad had taken a bottle of diazepam to try to commit suicide. I remember sitting on the floor and holding his hand and repeating over and over that I loved him. The ambulance came and took him to the hospital. Lights and sirens the whole way. We didn't know what happened during that time, but we found out a day or so later, and that is when our world changed. I am very sure if I did not call 911 that night that my dad would have succeeded, and it would have probably have drove my mom over the edge as well. And I have no idea why I didn't want to stay the night at my nanny's. I just had that feeling that I needed to go home. When I was in middle school, there were reports of a man in a car driving around neighborhoods near our old elementary school talking to girls and trying to get them into his car. We lived in one of said neighborhoods. One day after school, my friend and I were skateboarding when we saw a car, fitting the description, following some younger girls we knew. We rode up to them and asked if everything was okay. He told us to duck off and the girls said he wouldn't leave them alone. We didn't take kindly to being told to duck off, so we hopped off our boards and started smashing the duck out of this guy's side panels. He screamed and tore off. We told our parents and a family friend, who was a detective at the time, what had happened and what we had done. Within 24 hours the police had found his car because of the damage we had done to it and arrested the guy. In college I was studying at my school's business school building, waiting to meet a friend, and I had a sudden sense of dread. I texted my friend that I would just meet her at her dorm later instead of meeting at the business school, and I left to walk to a nearby library instead. When I got to the library about 20 minutes later, I checked my phone and I had nearly 20 missed calls and texts from my friends who knew I was at the business building. Literally seconds after I left, a student entered the building and stabbed multiple people, killing one professor and injuring several students. It happened in the room I had just been in. I stopped by a friend's house to watch a ball game. He, his wife and I were just relaxing and someone knocked on the door. It was the middle of the afternoon. He opened it up. He was expecting others might come by also. I hear him greeting someone. The guy was his brother I had never met, but had heard about. Very sketchy looking guy, meth teeth, scrawny, long greasy hair. My friend had told me that he had a brother who lived in the area who had a serious drug problem. Buddy is talking to his brother about nothing and the guy gets a call on his cell. Whoever called, all he told them was not yet, I'll call you later. Seems pretty obvious this guy has come to rob and most likely to take out witnesses. I look at my buddy, it seems he has come to the same conclusion. Now my buddy's wife is a no-nonsense type of woman, sweet, but athletic, on the tall side. She had left the room to go to the bathroom, or so she said. She comes back in the room with a handgun. I'm thinking WTF did I walk into? But she calmly says, Ron, you're strung out and came here with bad intentions. You need to quietly leave. If you get any ideas, Chris, their son, is sitting outside in his truck to make sure you go. Ron doesn't say a word. He just turns and goes out the door. We can hear his old pickup drive away rapidly. Chris comes in and says he's gone. I don't think he's coming back. They ask me to leave so they can decide what to do. They have already called the police, who are well acquainted with Ron. The next morning my buddy calls me. The police said they found his brother in the trailer park where he lived, murdered with multiple gunshots. They are guessing he was in serious drug debt and had come to rob his brother. I told my buddy I was sorry. He said don't be. I bartend and years ago I kicked this guy out because he was acting very strange, muttering under his breath that he would heal my other customers, just really hostile. He had missing fingers on one hand and he was kind of a bigger guy. After bar close I was almost finished counting money, so like an hour after everyone left, and I was just about to leave and I had that gut feeling. I looked out the window and that guy was standing on the corner watching me in a ski mask. I know it was him because of the build. As soon as I grabbed my phone he took off, but the cops know who he is. Now he has a vendetta out against me and he's well known around town. He's fucking nuts. When we were in our teens, my sister and I were walking our dog in our local forest area very close to our childhood home. We were about to leave and had just clipped our dog back up when a lady appeared out of nowhere and started chatting to us. She was odd. She told us her dog would love some socialization with our dog and could we go back with her for 5 minutes. What I hadn't clocked, but my sister had, was that her dog was nowhere to be seen. The lady was almost rounding us up to head back towards the forest when, little did I know, my sister had spotted a van out of the corner of her eye. I was still oblivious at this point. Suddenly, my sister screams "Dad!" and to our luck, my dad had finished work and was now out on a run. He starts waving and running towards us, and as we turned back around the lady had vanished. My sister looks back over at the van and sees the lady closing the passenger door and it's speeding off. Dog still nowhere to be seen. I believe we were minutes away from abduction. It was divine intervention that my dad happened to be at the right place at the right time. A friend called me and said there's a wildfire 8 miles away. Can you help me move my horses? So I drove down. She was wrong. It's 8 miles by car. Under 2 as the crow flies. We got the first set of horses out and down to another farm. The second set, I'm working on, and suddenly, things get quiet. It's as if the world stopped for a minute. I look at the horse and the horse looks like it's ready to run. I take a deep breath and suddenly, the noise comes back, the wind is hot AF. And the light changes. I told Sherry, the girl I'm helping, we gotta go now. No time to shove the horses into the trailer, they are smart enough to survive and I'll let him loose. We run to the truck, and the barn is already on fire. Then, we get in the truck and notice the fire past us and is blocking the road. So, we jump out and ran to a small pond for the horses. And we dive in, hoping the fire doesn't burn us. It was about 20 minutes of hell. It might have been longer, IDK. It was insanely scary, hot and loud. We got rescued by the fire department's water dropping helicopter. It landed in the field and pulled us in. We got lucky. The truck was burned to the frame. And the horse Sherry let go died. The one I let go survived but was burned. That's most likely the scariest moment. Grew up along the Gulf Coast. Daily storms in the summer were normal. We were heading home when one came in really quick. All of us were elementary or junior high age. We were crossing 2 wide open football fields. All of our hair was standing straight up in the air. We knew that meant lightning was imminent. A car was driving past, jumped the curb and drove up to us. We all got into the car and she slowly rolled back to the street. We went another block. And the lightning struck the goalpost. It was so close. Was never afraid of lightning until then. That was around 1979. I'm 57 and don't mess around. My brother and I were kids, playing hide and seek in the front yard of our house. My brother was 3, and I was 6. My brother was supposed to be counting and finding me, but he was taking forever, so I peeked around the side of the house to see what was taking so long. He had lost interest in the game and was standing near the front gate, which led to the street. As I'm looking, I see a brown car pull up with 2 men inside. The car wasn't familiar, and neither were the men. They both got out of the car and approached my brother. They started asking him questions and moving closer to him. I remember feeling panicked. I had learned about stranger danger in school and knew this wasn't right. I ran around the side of the house, flew through the back door, and screamed, Someone is trying to kidnap Steve. My dad didn't hesitate. He got up and flew through the front door. When the men saw my dad coming through the door, they bolted and peeled out. From that day forward, we weren't allowed to play in the front yard anymore. It's a really scary memory for me. Wednesday midday run along a beautiful river pathway near my apartment block. About 1 kilometer in I felt people watching me and directly turned around and ran home, even though I did not see anybody dart. Closed the 2 magnetic gates leading up to my door and didn't see anybody around or follow me. About 10 minutes later 2 guys were at my front door trying to push it in. I was luckily on the other side of the door at that moment and pushed it back closed with all my force and began screaming. I managed to security lock the front door and text my apartment block for help. I was on the 2nd floor, and they obviously watched which apartment I went into. Looking back at the apartment's security cameras, they were able to see the 2 guys pull apart the magnetic security gates, 2 of them. The block then quickly changed the gates to a mechanic lock that cannot be pulled apart. Doesn't I need to go home now feeling count? And it wasn't me, but my mom. Anyway, I was around 12 or so and my mom left to run an errand, leaving me alone. Very soon after she left, the doorbell rang. This was weird because we lived on a hill with only 2 neighbors, we all kept to ourselves, and we just didn't get random visitors. Thanks to some conveniently placed picture frames, I could see out the door without being seen. I look out and see a young man I don't recognize. He's dressed in a shirt and jeans and something just feels off. So I ignore him and wait for him to leave. But he doesn't. He lingers and starts smoking. Again, this is an isolated hill, I'm alone, and now I'm getting scared. I go and hide and plan to wait for my mom. Except she just left, had a few errands to run, and I couldn't reach the phone without the guy seeing me. As I'm trying to figure out what to do, my mom comes home. She runs in and asks if I'm okay. Apparently she got this random go home now urge. She hadn't even run her first errand yet but turned around immediately. Found the guy in our yard and asked what he needed. I guess he muttered something about looking for someone, or something to that effect, and my mom told him to leave. Apparently he was acting very strangely and made my mom nervous. To this day I have no idea what he wanted, and no idea how my mom knew to come home. But I am very grateful she did. I was freshly married in my early 20s, living in Fallbrook, California. My husband, ex, was a Marine and was at work and I was driving home from visiting family further south. In order to get into Fallbrook you have to travel along this long dark and windy street called Mission Road. It's already a super dark night, about 11 PM, and it's a little foggy as well. I'm slowing down and coming around this slight bend in the road and all of a sudden the hair goes up on my neck, and I feel incredibly anxious. About 5 seconds later, a young woman jumps out of the brush directly ahead of me, maybe 50 feet away, on the left-hand side of the road, while waving her arms in the air and gesturing frantically for me to pull over. I swerved a bit to the right, slowing down even further, but I did not stop. She was young, maybe early 20s or even late teens, and a little dirty, and I was immediately conflicted over continuing to drive. But something told me not to stop under any circumstances. I got further up the road, slowed a little more, and dialed 911 with one shaky hand. The dispatcher said she'd send someone to check, but encouraged me not to feel badly. Apparently there had already been calls about this girl over the last hour, and they were unable to find her when police followed up. I heard a few weeks later about some carjacking robbery attempts in the area. Very relieved I listened to my instincts that night. Standing outside my friend's house watering their garden while they were away on vacation. Not even 30 seconds after I shut the door and locked it, about 6 men started pounding on the door, reaching in the mail slot trying to unlock said door, telling me to come out plus calling me cutie and other degrading pet names. There's a video floating around of some crook reaching their arm into a mail slot trying to reach for the doorknob, and the homeowner welcoming the arm with a baseball bat. Male slot guy should have had his arm battered. I was at the state fair with my mom and my best friend. Friend and I were looking at the rides and the games. This creepy guy ABD, his blonde girlfriend, kept babbling at us about taking headshots and that he was a modeling agent. He just seemed off and really sleazy, and the girl was giving me the creeps, so I pretended that I saw my mom telling us to come and grabbed my friend and dragged her off. She was close to 5'8" and not a small girl, street 13 years old. I was 4'9" and around 65 pounds at 14 years old. A few days later, there's a news story and rumors going around the school about 2 girls being kidnapped, assaulted and murdered. They were taken from the fair the same day we were there, just few hours later. The creepy couple were Gerald and Charlene Gallegos, serial killers. I was walking down the street in a very unfamiliar city with a group of friends. I got this feeling and didn't know how to articulate it, so I said to the group, "Hey, I've got to use the restroom. Can we just duck inside this subway real quick? I promise I'll be quick." About a minute later there was a shootout just up the block. If we wouldn't have gone into the restaurant, we would have all been standing right in the middle of the incident waiting to cross the street. I had a 9-month-old baby at home and didn't go out much, and one of my friends was in from out of town and asked if I wanted to see a band, whose members were people I knew socially from college. I said sure, that will be fun. I met her and a bunch of people at a bar across the street before the show and had a nice time, but got a feeling that I should go home. My husband was at home with our baby and wanted me to have fun, and I was, but I had a bad feeling to just leave. I said my goodbyes and left. There was a shooting at the bar that night. No one I knew was hurt, but they were locked in the bar for hours and it was terrifying for them. I'm glad I trusted my instincts. I was at a family gathering, basically a reunion but just for family within reasonable driving distance, probably 30 people altogether. It was at County Park on a small lake with some grills and buildings, just an empty hall with some picnic tables inside. You could rent for this kind of stuff. The sky started darkening as a storm was approaching. All the coolers, chairs, gonads and other kids' toys, etc. were brought into the building anticipating the rain. The plan was to wait it out since afternoon showers are common just about every day in the summer. Something in the air didn't feel or smell right even though it appeared to be just a regular afternoon storm. Hair on my neck was standing up and I was in full flight mode. Can't really describe it. The feeling in the pit of my stomach can only be described as absolute dread. I told my wife to take my daughter and get in the car. My brother-in-law took one look at my face and said, "What's wrong?" Apparently I was white as a ghost. It wasn't even raining yet and I was full on panic yelling for everyone to leave. Something isn't right. No one else was that worried, mostly concerned with how I was acting. I went out to the car and as soon as I was about to turn the key the tornado sirens went off. We were not far from wherever they put those, or they are just stupidly loud, because it was deafeningly loud. Now the rest of the family is pouring out of the building to their cars, kids crying, and I look across the lake maybe a few miles in the distance and see a funnel cloud. Got the hell out of there, as did everyone else. The building we had rented for this family BBQ thing was completely annihilated, literally just a slab of concrete and a shit ton of debris all around. It was hit dead on by an EF3. I was scuba diving in Asia. 3 of us went to a reef that hadn't been dived on before, which bottomed out at 50-70 m depth. 5 minutes into the dive, we all get a very bad feeling like we were being watched. Ignored it but the feeling wouldn't go away. Further 10 minutes into the dive, we all watched the silhouette of a white shark glide slowly past, right on the periphery of where we could see. Then glide back in the other direction a minute later. The decompression stop to get out was the scariest 3 minutes of my life. I was a high school teenager around 13. I'm petite and look way younger, so looked at least 10-11. I was in my school uniform on my way to school and our local shopkeeper stops me. Starts talking to me as usual and asks me what my plans are for the day. I look down at my uniform and tell him I'm going to school. He asks me if there's anything interesting happening and I responded with, as a matter of fact, we have mini trip for my geography class. So he offers me a few snacks which I declined. Now, the reason I declined it was because he was speaking to me from the back door of the shop and asked me to come to the back storeroom to collect the free snacks. I started feeling really strange and declined and said I have to go, I'm getting late. He then asked me for my number and I got freaked out and said I don't have a phone and ran. I remember him shouting something at me, but I was too scared to hear him out. When I got back from school, I told my parents about it and my father went storming to the shop to confront. Well, the coward of a man hid while the owner of the shop apologized. It made me wonder if I was a naive teenager who actually walked in for the free snacks, thinking he was being friendly, what would this grown man have done to me? Keep in mind, he looked like he was in his early 30s and I was 13 in my school uniform, looking like a 10-year-old. I've had a few close calls as a young girl, but this one stood out the most to me. When I was a teenager, me and some friends were hanging out around midnight. A caravan drives past slowly with a few people looking out the windows. We all look at each other quiet, and the caravan pulls into a nearby parking space. We all get up and walk to our bikes because something feels really off. A few minutes later we hear someone shout, and as I turned around there was about 5 or 6 people getting out with metal pipes and other things in hands. We ran so fast, nothing happened, but I'm 99% sure we were about to get beaten and robbed. I was an infantry platoon leader in Afghanistan. One night we were on a foot patrol along the outskirts of a town where we were concerned about Taliban activity. I decided to move in closer to get a look at the place without worrying about the people of the town coming and going, which is always stressful. It was about 3 AM, so everyone was asleep. It was completely silent. My interpreter carried an FM radio that he used to monitor non-secure traffic, which is how the Taliban tended to communicate back then. We hear something in Pashto on his radio, and he very calmly turns to me and says, "Sir, they are saying the ambush is set." I immediately got on my radio and told my squad leaders to halt, and we pulled back and got the hell out of Dodge. That was probably the most pucker I have felt in combat. I am convinced that interpreter saved several lives that night, and when he messaged me during the fall of Kabul asking if I could get his family out, I called every contact I could think of to make sure he got on a flight. They currently live in Seattle where he works in it. About 3 weeks ago now I was Blackwater diving off the coast of Boynton Beach, Florida. For those that don't know, Blackwater diving involved being dumped with a light buoy to drift over hundreds of feet of water in the Gulf Stream at night. The light buoy attracts all sorts of alien critters that come up from the deep to feed, so it's a lot of fun for underwater photographers. Needless to say, as a precaution, all divers must at minimum wear a light on their tank to be seen, and I had accidentally grabbed my blue blinky light. Before I was going to jump in, the captain mentioned that blue blinking lights were used by fishermen to attract big things at night. As a regular shark diver, there's not too much I'm afraid of down there, but something sent a chill down my spine and I switched my light for a regular green glow stick. That very same night, a legendary Blackwater diver was on another boat a couple miles north and got full on impaled in the leg by a huge swordfish. The fish ripped the sword out of his leg and then kept beating him with it, the way they hunt for the big squid down deep. Dude had his leg torn up and had to self-rescue himself from about 100 feet of depth. No idea if he'll be able to walk, let alone dive again. I was hammock camping while riding my motorcycle through Arkansas. I had a dream that I was jetting pulled over by the cops on my bike. The flashing lights were super bright in my eyes. And as I woke from my dream, I noticed my blue hammock tent is lighting up like flashing police lights. I immediately felt an adrenaline spike and went into full flight mode. Packed my sheet up faster than I could even put my boots on. Hopped on my bike in my underwear and rode a mile to the top of the campground where the showers were. The second I stepped into the shower cabin, the sky opened up and cloud to ground lighting started striking trees in the campground every 10-15 seconds. I could have been royally ducked up by a lightning strike had I stayed sleeping between two of them. Years ago I was at a club with some friends. I was at the bar and for some reason looked down at the other end of the bar and saw two guys quietly arguing. They tried to keep from being overheard but I saw their agitated face. I went back to my group of friends and told them we should go. This was a popular club and it took us forever to get in so they didn't want to leave. I don't know what came over me but I picked up my friend's girlfriend, she was barely 5 tall, and started walking to the door. She was kicking the entire time and the rest of the party followed me outside telling me to put her down. When we got outside, we heard the distant pop pop and people screaming. We looked at each other for a second then ran for our cars. I forgot to put her down and was still carrying her over my shoulders. Update: dang, I didn't think this would blow up. It was the early 1990s and we were at a club in Miami. If I recall correctly from the local news, it was a drug deal that went bad between two groups. No one was killed but they wounded each other and a couple of innocent people. Lol, I'm still not carrying her today, the legend are false. Those two eventually got married and they mentioned me in their speech. Something about the other groomsmen holding me back so that I don't get the urge to carry her across the doorway. About a year and a half ago, I got out of a concert hall and I was with my FWB, her friend and her friend's BF. We walked across the busy street to a bar, 2:30 AM around this time. Got a quick tequila shot and a drink to end the night and we left to call a Uber. We were sitting on the side of the road on a curb waiting for the Uber and there was a group of people that walked our side. They just looked like bad ducking news and they were just looking to cause problems. I look at my FWB and pulled her up. She looks at me like WTF at first and then she saw the we need to faux look in my eyes so she turned around and said we are going to the other two. Once we got up, not 5 seconds later bang 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 and I felt like I got a painful splinter in the back of my leg but we ran to the cop car across the street to get some cover. Turns out, I got a fragment of the curb that we were sitting on where the bullet hit exactly where we were sitting in my calf. It was a wild shot that just happened to hit where we were sitting. Unfortunately, someone died that night and my gut feeling saved my friends or myself from a fatal gunshot that wasn't even intended for us. The only reason I knew about a piece of stone embedded in my leg and it wasn't just a muscle pull from running was because a cop responding and running by us while we were standing behind the cop car and he saw blood on my leg and thought I got shot. A quick statement and ER visit to fish out the half marble sized shard of stone in my calf, while absolutely wasted, and I was on my way home at 6 AM. I didn't really put it all together until I got home thinking holy shit, I can't believe I'm alive right now. I was camping in eastern Arizona with a friend of mine. We like to hike in this particular area that's fairly isolated. We found a place probably 14 or 15 miles deep into the forest on small quad bike trails and set up camp for the night. We put out our fire and go into our tents. Probably about 15 minutes go by. I'm reading a book on my phone and what can I only describe as a roar sounds like it's about 50 feet away from our campsite. Never in my life have I been so terrified. I had immediate goosebumps and went into full panic mode. My friend and I both get out of our tents, look around, and don't see anything because it's dark as hell, but run as fast as we can and just hop in the car. Immediately drove off and found a motel about an hour drive away. I will never forget that sound. I've seen bears in real life and looked up what a bear roar sounds like and it was nothing like it. The one we heard was almost high pitched and just filled me with immediate dread. No clue to this day what it was but I am glad we noped the duck out of there. We came back the next day and everything was as we left it other than the coals in the fire were spread around a bit. There was no wind that night, so I don't know what happened. I haven't gone back to that area since and I have no desire to. Whatever made that noise definitely didn't want us there.